actually,
Good morning, everyone.
it said something nice about it.
We have a different format, different time, and the format isn't that different. You can see we've brought the room size down, which kind of seems to be appropriate as we've been having to continue with these, and we're in a bit of a rhythm, and I know a number of people are watching these streaming, so we've got probably a much larger audience than what we see here. But we want to have a very abbreviated format. What you can see in terms of our structure today, I want to emphasize brief. I want to spend as much time as possible answering your questions, giving you updates with regard to what we know and where things are at as we've continued to move forward with this. I'll provide some opening comments. We'll have both Johannes and Robin from the Budget Task Force, as well as Jolie, who will talk about budget issues, issues around what we know, any updates on the Public Authority, Chapter 36. We'll then hear from Tom Lujak and Johannes on the Budget Communication Task Force, and then our governance group updates and announcements will follow at that point, and we'll open it up for Q&A. We have stressed to all of us to have at most 1 or 2 slides. So with that, here's my 1 slide. And I'll spend a little bit of time on it, just very briefly, covering what information we do know. We haven't heard anything further about the biennial budget. The February 16th campus meeting, the last updates we provided were the most substantive, so there's really nothing new. What has appeared, the big news item that will probably take a lot of the air out of the room in terms of legislative attention is probably going to be the right to work attention that will be happening this week and next week in Madison. So the UW system budget is not going to probably be in front of a lot of people's eyes in terms of the legislature, given what is going on there. There have been some announcements, and so you might have been in some of the different settings where last week we talked about briefings have been scheduled, and this is not a public hearing by Joint Finance, but the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, which works on the language, they take the governor's proposed budget, and then they turn it into more of a legal document that then the Joint Finance Committee has hearings on. So the briefings for the Joint Finance Committee occur March 2nd through 4th in Madison, and the UW system briefing specifically is on March 3rd. And then public hearings are yet to be scheduled. We have offered and have had discussion with Joint Finance about UWM hosting one of the hearings, and we haven't heard back on that yet. We certainly hope that we could host it here at UWM. There's a lot of speculation. I won't go through last week when I shared with you what we had been hearing. You've been hearing the same thing. It's all over the map, lots and lots of discussion, but nothing definitive. There simply haven't been any formal updates, which is part of the process. One of the helpful things that happened was last week, hearing from 3 regents who visited the Faculty Senate meeting, there was a good explanation about there being 4 acts to this. This is the first act, meaning that now it's been proposed, and the second act is when Joint Finance starts doing their deliberations and hold a public hearing. Then it goes into Act 3, which is when the Assembly and the Senate, they actually start discussing it. So the broader group beyond the 16 members of the Joint Finance Group, so that's Act 3. And then Act 4 is when the votes occur and the governor ultimately weighs in and goes through that path. So this takes place over the next several months, and I want to continue to stress that this has several months to play out. In terms of advocacy and media activities, shortly after we met last week, I spent some time with the Business Journal editorial team. Tom Lujak and I attended that. We spent a fair amount of time with them, and that resulted in Friday's Business Journal article. There have also been additional updates in terms of further media work. I'll be visiting with the Biz Times later this afternoon. I'll be taped for UWM later this week, and other meetings, other media events are being scheduled. So plenty of work in terms of advocacy and media activities. The communication team will talk further about this, and then when I have my wrap-up comments, I'll talk to you further about the work that we're doing in the community on that. So those are some brief updates from me, and I'll ask now at this point for Robin and Johannes to address the Budget Task Force.
Good morning. I'll start and then see if Johannes wants to add anything. The Budget Task Force last met on February 16th. We're on a schedule to meet about once every 2 weeks. In the meantime, we have formed and convened a support team made up of subject matter experts on the campus to help the task force itself research strategies, short, medium, and long term. That group is going to be meeting approximately weekly. They've met once. They've taken some initial assignments, and they will go from there. I believe they're meeting again this week. We are working on laying out a 6-year projection of the impact of the cuts. This is not a cut that can be taken in 1 or 2 years or one biennium. So we're looking at what exactly would it take to undertake a cut of this proposed magnitude over 5 or 6 years. In the meantime, we have asked campus units to provide feedback to the budget task force on 5 and 10% reduction scenarios. We are emphasizing that in no way does this mean that that's what's going to happen or that reductions will be allocated across the board. Most certainly they will not. But by taking that input, we're starting to look at what sorts of things would be required in order to undertake a budget cut of that magnitude. It's definitely become apparent to Johannes and myself over the last week that there are many people with many ideas that they would like to express to the task force about things that we should look at or could look at, ways to think about this cut. And so I think one of the first next tasks this coming week is for us to develop some ways that the campus can offer that input to the budget task force. We might be looking at some surveys or at least an online form by which people could submit suggestions. We'd like to see some focus groups where we can gather groups of people together and get that input. We are trying to take a very thoughtful, deliberative process because these cuts are of such a magnitude, like we said, this cannot be done overnight, and so we're not ready to go and talk about layoffs or any specific measure. We really want to look at what will our campus look like when we come through this and how do we get there, rather than taking any rash actions. So that's what we're working on. Johannes, would you like to say anything? Oh, one other comment, and that is that Jerry Terrer and I spent an hour with Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reporter Karen Herzog this past week, just walking her through the budget, explaining exactly what our sources of revenues were, the impact of the budget cuts this current biennium and how that has left our campus very strained already, and that's the context in which we are now looking at the future cuts. It was a very productive discussion, and we felt that it was a very good exchange of information.
Thanks, Rob. No, I can just add to Robin's comment about the input. We got some very good input from a number of people who really want to help us going through a very, very challenging time. So please continue. We sense that people have good ideas. So send those ideas. Patrice and I had a meeting last week on some good ideas too. The other thing is, if you hear rumors of what we are going to do, please share it with us or with me before you add that on, because many things are just rumors that people say, oh, did you hear that is going to happen? We will not do structural changes without all the proper processes if it gets to that point, because it's just important that we work well and share the communication. If you hear any rumor that, oh, did you hear this is going to happen, share it. So we can either say, yes, we look at that and we share it with people that are involved, or you know what, that's just a rumor, it's simply not true. Because that is just, it's so difficult to cover all the communication aspects with all the issues that's happening within this paradigm in which we are faced with. So that'll be just my appeal is, what you know, what you hear, share it. Just one email, even if we don't reply, just let us know. That's what the, thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm here to give an update on where we stand with our budget. Let me just advance here. Our Budget Communication Task Force. We met for the first time this past Friday and had, I thought, a very, very good conversation with both members of the task force as well as the entire support team. We will be meeting at least on a bi-weekly basis, more often as needed. We did present and discuss the charge that we put in front of this group last week and what the work of that committee or task force will be. The primary focus is to make sure that we steer ourselves in the right direction in terms of communicating the right story at the right time to the right people, with the ultimate goal, of course, of influencing the outcome of the budget discussion. so that UWM's interests are protected. Our subject matter experts, the support team who are in the background of the task force, working alongside the task force, has met at least a dozen times over the last 2 weeks. We have another meeting scheduled for tomorrow. We're doing this almost on a daily basis as we look at the best ways in which we can go ahead and make sure that our budget website, which you can get to right off the home page, is as complete and as updated as possible. We have gotten a number of great suggestions, both at the task force meeting as well as from some of you following these public sessions. And so we will be enhancing our website with information that we hope will make it even easier for you to conduct the outreach that's necessary for us to have influence in the budget process. For example, we'll be providing a more detailed set of instructions and some advice on exactly what you should say to legislators when you do reach out to them. I've seen drafts of a couple of letters that people have shared with me that have gone on to the legislators, and they're just wonderful personal stories. And I think the message that I would share with you is that, well, we can give you talking points and we can give you a model or a form to follow. The most effective way in which you can bring results or see results in your outreach to legislators is to speak from the heart, to tell your own story in your own words. That is incredibly powerful, and so much more powerful than what might appear to be a form letter or a postcard that some groups use to create a sense of volume in terms of sentiment, but does not really convey the emotion or the passion that comes through in a personal letter. We're also going to put up on the website all of the names and the addresses of the Joint Finance Committee members explicitly, so you don't have to look for that. Those are the 16 people who will be voting on the governor's budget plan in the Joint Finance Committee. And then, as we said before, it is forwarded on to both chambers of the legislature in either late May or sometime in June. And of course, you can find the names and the addresses of your own individual legislators on the Legislator Finder, which is part of the Panther Advocate site. And in fact, we've gone through a redesign on that page, which you can find right off the menu bar at the top of our budget information website off the home page. And as you can see, if you go to the button Find Legislators, you simply go onto that site, type in your address, and up will come the names and the addresses and the contact information for your state assemblyperson and your state senator. So one of the other things that I wanted to share with you today is the result of a lot of work from members of the University Relations team and the folks in the Chancellor's office. We've created a fact and impact piece. This is the one-pager. It's actually two sides, but it is in PDF form on the website, and it really is a wonderful go-to place for the facts and figures that will help inform your own communications to legislators, but also in your conversations with people that you know who could become advocates on our behalf. So we have hard copies of those for anybody who would like them. Just contact me or my office. But you can also print one off the website. Again, it's in PDF form. And then very importantly, if you've gone to our webpage this morning, we have a full screen takeover of our new research report. This is the story of UWM. This is why a research university makes such a huge difference. We've been creating these research reports over the last several years. We share them with legislators, with business leaders, and actually we use it as a tool to tell our story across the country. It's mailed to presidents and chancellors at institutions who ultimately have a voice in determining what their sense of different universities are in the annual U.S. News and World Report survey. So this, however, is just fresh off the press, and an electronic version of it is showcased today on our website. So we encourage you to get in and read the stories. Every school and every college is represented within the book. And again, it's a very, very vivid example of what we do every day here at UWM. In our meetings with the legislators and with the media, quite honestly, what we hear frequently is, tell us your story. Tell us in your terms, in real terms, what impact you have on the people in the community. And while each one of us have our own individual narrative to share, a story like this, a storybook like this, can be very, very powerful to steer people to, because it demonstrates the reach that we have, not just throughout the region, but throughout the country and throughout the world when you take a look at the amazing work that's being done here. And with that, I will turn it over to our governance groups.
I don't have a lot to say other than keep the faith, I guess. There hasn't been a lot of new developments, and I'm feeling kind of depressed this morning, so I think that'll be all I'll say.
Can you advance this slide? So just a quick update from Academic Staff Committee. Thanks to Kim Kimple and the Secretary of the University's office, we've established the Academic Staff Committee News to keep you up to date on what's happening with the budget issues. On there you can also find our position statement from the Academic Staff Senate, so keep watching that space. We'll also provide more links so that people can link back to particularly asking questions and the budget information site. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank everybody who came and who's watching online. You might have heard that there's been requests for departments to prepare scenarios for a 5 and 10% cut in their budgets. So now is a good time to talk to within your department, pass on your suggestions and concerns to those folks that are working on those scenarios. We need to get a good picture of what's happening. The March Board of Regents meeting of the university system will be focusing on impacts of what this proposal will do to the UW. This is our picture of how that's going to look and what it might do. So if you have input, now's the time to get some forward.
And Ryan and other governance group representatives from the Student Association are teaching or unavailable. We've asked them to join us, and we've also asked them and talked about the dates for the next several meetings that we have scheduled, and we'd like to have representation from them as they're available for our meetings. Just wrapping a couple of these things up, very clearly we've got some challenges, significant ones in front of us. What you can see, how will we absorb the cuts in the context of the work that we've already received, and the basic direction. We've had $32 million in cuts over the last 15 years. We're now looking at roughly $40 million in cuts over the next 2. This is huge. That's not easy to absorb. And of course, the impact is on all of us, the talent. And I'm very concerned about that. I'm very concerned about our ability to continue to deliver the Wisconsin idea, the types of things that we have done for a long, long time across the UW system, and certainly here and over the last 50 years here at UW-Milwaukee. So that's the concern in terms of morale, retention, engagement, all those types of things that are so vital and so important. That's what's in front of us. What we're doing, real quickly, I think you've heard from the members here today, is the cost containments. Those are, of course, quite important. And as I mentioned in the Business Journal editorial that you saw that came out, perhaps you saw that, but I encourage you to look at that. You can see the arguments that I'm advancing in terms of the support and the things that we believe are the impacts that we have in the community in so many different ways. But as I said in that article, it'd be irresponsible for us not to at least start looking at areas where we can curtail any expenses that are not absolutely essential. You've heard from the task forces. Those will continue and do important work. We'll continue to have these weekly campus budget meetings as much as you would like. There have been many emails to constituents and much engagement with social media. That will continue. We have, as Tom pointed out, some new information. I have a chancellor statement that will go out later this week. It will be final by Wednesday at the latest, and there will be 2 versions of this. One is an internal version that's more of a narrative that's, I would argue, fully developed or relatively fully developed, and then a shorter, briefer one that's similar to the approach that Tom has shared with you. We've had a dozen meetings so far with our legislators, and I've talked already enough about those in the past, and those will continue, but for the next 2 weeks, good luck getting anybody's time in Madison right now with the events that are on people's calendars. Presence in the media, I've mentioned a few things, but just as an example, just how how every day we're doing things. This afternoon with Biz Times. Tomorrow I'll be at the Rotary. There will be a lot of coverage of that. Wednesday with UWM. There's other events and lots of things almost every day where me or others up here on the panel are engaged with the media, really making our case. The supporters that we have are immense, the number of individuals, and a lot of that is behind the scenes. A lot of that is phone calls, emails, and discussions. But trust me when I say there's a lot of individuals who reach out to us, and I encourage you to really continue to make the case. Keep in mind that our work is not just the work that we've done and the case that we make. It's really getting people to recollect all the value and the impact that we've had for so many decades in this community. So it's not like it's forgotten and not aware, but we need to make that very much salient and present in folks' mind. As we go forward, just looking ahead, and it's really hard right now. I completely appreciate that. Every day it's you know, as we go through this. But as I try to stand back and look ahead, I think about the new UWM, if I can put that name on it. And I think about, Robin, when you made the comment about, you know, this, it reminds me of that type of idea. When we go through the transformational changes that we will have to go through, what will be our strengths? What will remain? There's going to be lots of great things, and we have to continue to protect those. I do want to, just on a personal basis, talk about change for a moment and know how difficult change is. It's incredibly difficult, and that's why we want to continue to communicate as much as possible, because absent an awareness and understanding as to what's happening and what role can we play, it makes it that much more difficult. So we want to try to provide as many opportunities for you to have a voice in this and for you to try to influence this just like the rest of us are trying to influence it. So that's up to us to really provide channels, ways that we can have collective force in this. So that's what we're working on very, very hard. And the power of you is it comes back to how resilient we have been and will continue to be. And I have a lot of faith because of the talent that we have. And I see that every day, the excitement and the power, the positive direction that you all bring to this. And the final comment is just how much strength we have if we work together. The concern that I have in times like this is that we tend to see boogeymen and women in places that they really aren't here. But these are challenges that nobody asked for. These are things that we have to deal with, though. And I'm paraphrasing roughly Lane Hall, so thanks, Lane, for that quote. But the idea is that, you know, we're in this together and we'll succeed together. So that's it. Questions are welcome, and we'd ask you to keep your questions brief so we can provide as much opportunity as possible. If you can come to the mic and let us know what your name is and what area you represent, that would be very helpful.
I'm Martha Carlin from the Department of History, and I want to thank you all for coming here and providing this information. I think all the information on the website looks really great and important, but I have 3 concrete suggestions for further kinds of outreach, not only to the UWM community, including the metropolitan area, but to the state in general and the system contacts in general. And these are my 3 concrete suggestions. Number 1, this was a suggestion I made at the LNS meeting on Friday. Every UW campus should try to hold a town meeting, invite its local legislators, and invite all members of the public so that that campus can put forth a direct face-to-face advocacy to local voters, to local families, to local students and alumni and their families. That relying on people to come find our webpage and scroll through it and so on, that's great for the news junkies. Similarly, articles in the Business Times and other papers is great for the news junkies. It won't necessarily reach the fullest possible public. I would like us to do a face-to-face outreach across the system, across the state, to the fullest possible public. Second suggestion, I think that every campus should invite its legislators to come for a visit. Come sit in on classes, come meet with people, come talk to students, show them our face, let them see the real face of our community so that they can get a sense of whom their proposed changes to our community will affect and in what ways they'll affect it, and so that we can showcase what we do so well. And my third concrete suggestion is that we need a physical icon to let people who support us display it so that their neighbors can see, so that their legislators can see, so that news media can see, so that we can all take support from one another's show of support. And I would suggest something very simple, such as a rainbow ribbon with the colors of the various UW campuses, and if possible, printed with a statement along the lines of, I support the Wisconsin idea, or I support the UW system and the Wisconsin idea, or I support Chapter 36, or all of the above. But something very simple that can be worn, that can be tied onto a car door handle, and that can be distributed very simply. And I would suggest that a ribbon of this kind be sent to every single alumnus of the UW system who lives in Wisconsin at least, and every single current student and the families of all current students. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. These are great suggestions, and let me tell you, one of the things that you suggested is in fact underway with respect to the legislature. Every legislator that Tom Lujak and I have visited with has been invited. I would say, Tom, maybe half of those folks have been here, and we are working with them and many others to have them on campus. Your point is right on. If people, it's one thing to read about it, it's one thing to hear, but man, seeing what we do and having that experience to interact with our students, our faculty, our alumni, there's nothing that equates to that. It's very powerful. So that's underway. We need to do that even further and really try to get folks here as much as possible. I like your idea of the town hall. I love the idea of engaging the community even further. The ribbons is a system initiative. It'd be hard for us, but we can certainly feed that up, and we can look at what we can do ourselves. So great suggestions. Thank you. Very good. Hi, Bruce.
I'm Bruce Fetter. I'm president of the retirees. I'm first taking a leaf from Governor Walker's book in that he suggested that his changes in the university system ought to be considered comparable to those of Act 10. I'd like to look at what I consider to be a crisis in Wisconsin governance, not UWM governance, but we have had a system that has been become a stealth system. The notion that you cannot plan in advance for legislative debates because it's already arranged in a small room. And for me, this is government by stealth, which I think characterizes the kind of government that we have been having of late. It reminds me a little bit of Huey Long in Louisiana in 1935. The problem is that when you have legislators who have been compromised by the fact that they can pick their own constituents in their legislative districts, there is a real problem of compromise. People have been compromised by the corruption in our elective process, and I think we have to put this out. Now, I know you can't do it. I'm not an employee of the state of Wisconsin. Almost everybody else in the room is, and I realize that there are real constraints on what you can say in public or in private for that matter. But I think it is important to point out to the people of Wisconsin that our legislature has been compromised and that certain Republicans have had to compromise their own principles in order to be able to pick their own electorates. And this is a very, very dangerous situation. It goes far beyond university. I have here the suggestions of my colleague, Erica Sander, who wants to protect Chapter 36 from the establishment of a public authority. And she wants to protect the rules which we have been embedded in state law and not allow this to be offloaded to a committee of the regents or for any other unelected body. But as I say, I think it is important for the citizens of Wisconsin to realize that we're in bad hands now. And it is important to get good-thinking Republicans to admit that the kind of things that have been used to bulldoze legislation through our state government are wrong, that we will get a very bad reputation for being an undemocratic state, a state where interests trump those of the population. So I don't know what you can do, because I realize that you are, Mark, like so many of the other people here, an employee of the state, but I'm not, and I just hope somehow we can get out the message that Wisconsin self-government is compromised right now and needs to be defended.
Bruce, thank you. One suggestion that I'd make, and I'd ask others on the panel if they have any additional thoughts, one thing that we all can do is write letters to the editor. We can certainly contact those in the media and provide our perspectives on anything, and I think you've offered some great and important points. Other thoughts or ideas on that? Okay, thank you. Okay. Other questions? Coffee break?
I just had a question about the March 3rd briefing. Is that open to the public, and is that going to be live streamed? Can we put up a link to that?
Okay.
Yellen, the March 3rd briefing will take place in the state capitol in the Joint Finance Committee room. The committee each year prior to going on the road for its round of public hearings receives reports from each of the agencies on the essence of what the budget means, what impact would it have on their operations. It's quite possible that those briefings will be televised on the WIS-I network, which you can get online and on some cable systems. They've not issued their schedule yet, but I would be very surprised if you couldn't pick it up and observe it there. We'll be represented there. I'll be there on behalf of the institution. At this point, nobody from the individual campuses have been asked to speak. Typically at these briefings, the UW system president and the president of the Board of Regents appear before the committee to comment on the budget. But we will, as we hear more, we will certainly share that. In fact, we can get a note out to campus once we get confirmation on whether or not that briefing will be broadcast and where you can find it.
Tom, is it fair to say, as I look ahead, just given that, as I look ahead, we have our next briefing on March 3rd in the afternoon, and I think we're third on the agenda. Will we know at that point if there's been any additional information that we can share at that point?
Yeah, we should find out by the end of this week whether or not the program will be broadcast. In terms of the briefing on the 3rd itself, I think it's likely that we'll come up in the early to mid-afternoon. It all really depends on what controversy is related to the other budget or agencies that are up for review. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the Department of Natural Resources is up before we are. There are significant changes in the budget in terms of staffing. Some of you may have seen the stories. There are recommendations that some of the scientist positions would be eliminated in the budget. And so we would anticipate that there would be a longer period of time devoted to discussing that by committee members. So it's really a crapshoot, though, in terms of timing. So I can't predict at this point whether, when we come together on the 3rd, if it will have any results from that meeting. It's very likely that it will still be going on when we meet here next week at that time.
And so that I put this up in terms of our next 2 weekly meetings that are scheduled, and I think given what Tom just said, we probably won't have a lot of takeaways at that point for the March 3rd meeting, but we'll keep you updated. And by the way, I've had scheduled in advance for some time now an out-of-state donor meeting, actually a series of meetings, so I won't be here at next week's meeting, but the rest of the team will be here, and that will be moderated by our provost who will be here. And then you can see the dates, and we're mixing those up in terms of time and timing. So, hi, Joel.
Hi, Chancellor. Thank you, and thank you to everyone for speaking to us this morning. This has been said before in various ways, and I hesitated to say it again, but I appreciate your keeping our spirits up and saying that that change is painful and not all of it is necessarily going to be bad. But when I see language like visualize, the future and there will be new discoveries and some of it may be painful, we've all been visualizing the future, and I look around. My colleagues are not. I think they're incredibly idealistic and optimistic and committed and spirited. These are not a bunch of people who will, lay down at the sign of the first sign of difficulty. If that were the case, then they would already been laying down for some time. That sort of language, I think, reflects a disconnect that a lot of us have been talking about between some of the tone set from the very top of the UW system and what all of us are talking about on the ground. That doesn't, we have already been cut very drastically over a number of years. This is my 5th year now. I've just seen us been cut and cut and cut. In my own department, Foreign Languages and Literature, I should say I'm Joel Berkowitz, and that's my department, and I'm the director of the Stahl Center for Jewish Studies. We have no tenured or tenure-track director of a thriving Japanese program. We just had someone leave for another institution, did incredible things to build that up, and he's gone, and there's no prospect of replacing him in the foreseeable future, at least with anyone on a long-term contract. We have no tenured or tenure-track director of also a thriving Chinese program. We have a German program, and we all know how critical German has been to the history of Milwaukee, and it's fairly important to arts and letters and philosophy and things like that. And we have a program that has dwindled in terms of its faculty. And I should emphasize that all of the people who are here, the academic staff, the tenured and tenure-track professors in these various programs, are excellent, and they're doing wonderful work. But that's just one little example of cuts around the university that are leaving gaping holes. And so the future that we visualize is not one of, okay, we found some efficiency somewhere, but one where there are really gaping holes and where the very integrity of the work that we do is so badly compromised that we wonder what kind of university is left. And that's aside from the very significant issue of issues like tenure and the protection of our academic freedoms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me respond.
It's not really a question, obviously.
Yeah, no. But first of all, thank you for the sensitivity around the word visualize. I don't mean to be in any way, when I use that word, Pollyanna-ish or optimistic in terms of saying it is going to be a new, better day. That's not the point of that. What I'm really asking us all to think about is, given these cuts, given the magnitude of them, what is the new UWM that can be a strong university that does things in the remarkable ways that we can, and not just think about it in terms of a cut of whether it's 5% or 10% or strategic, some have this cut, some have that cut, but to think about, as the future has changed, what's the best way for us to approach that different future? So that's what I'm asking. So visualizing that context, in an era of higher education that does not have the support, if you've seen the latest in North Carolina, there are similar challenges to higher education in a state similarly endowed well with deep research values and experience and centers, and it's undergoing tremendous challenges by their legislature. Other states, Texas has had incredible reductions in funding and so forth. We could go around the country. And so we see these incredible challenges. And in that context, I'm asking us all to think about, how does UWM position itself in a different future in a way that remains strong, that protects students, our research, our abilities to engage in the community? So it's in that context, but I think what your comments help me is to better frame and explain that. It's not a visualize, in a rhetorical abstract sense, but really think about what is the new UWM. I mean, this has potentially profound changes for us that we can approach in terms of how we have in the past, in terms of of across-the-board types of cuts, or we can say, let's stand back and think about what is a form and substance that enables us to work potentially better together, given these significant changes. So, thanks, Joel. Okay, anybody want to add anything?
In terms of the changes, I don't know if you have seen the story out of Illinois in the last few days, but the new governor announced late last week that he is calling for a $400 million reduction to the Illinois university system. And so pick up the Tribune or go online and take a look at the reaction. It is almost like a replay of where we were 4 or 5 weeks ago here in Wisconsin. Very troubling, but nonetheless part of the landscape that surrounds us.
Tom, would you please add the caveat that the legislature is a totally different political party than the governor?
Yeah,
Would you
good.
say that again, Margo? Couldn't hear.
Yeah, Margo said the legislative makeup is different than here. There's not one-party rule in Illinois. You have a very strong Democratic House in the legislature. So whether or not it will go through in anywhere near the fashion that has been proposed is unknown. But the fact is that he made a very similar statement in terms of the reasons why those changes or those cuts were justified.
Stan.
I have sort of 3 questions, and I'll preface them with a couple comments. Bruce, thank you. No one could have said what's going on better than you just did. In keeping with that, as I've said before, the idea of a public authority and a massive cut to the university system didn't just poof appear in the minds of the governor and his budget writers. There must have been some documentation, justification, planning involved in developing this proposal. And what my question is to Jolie is, can we make use of our state open records to find out what that justification and plan is? Because we have to know what they're up to if we're going to forcibly object or oppose their plans. So that's one question. The second question, and Tom, I think you might be able to answer this one, is this massive budget deficit that the governor's trying to address. I've heard it described as a deficit of propositions, that the agency's submissions for next year's budget, if they were all granted to their maximum, would result in this massive deficit that the governor has to address. But they don't really exist right now. Yeah, they're short, but not $1.8 billion. And if you could answer that for me. The third one is, I've seen reports that one of the things that we all will lose when we go to the public authority is accrued sick leave. And I've had a lot of people asking me about that, and I'd really like to hear some good news that that's a rumor. Thank you.
So probably Jolie, and then Tom, and then either Robin or Jolie.
Yeah, I can take 1 and 3. So your question was whether people can make records requests to find out what might exist regarding the genesis of this proposal. The answer is yes. Any member of the public can make a request to find out if there are any documents that would meet the substance of that request. For number 3, we're not aware of any, the draft legislation removes, like many other provisions from Chapter 36, a provision that provides for the accrual prospectively of sick leave from year to year. There is no proposal that we're aware of to do anything to take away accrued sick leave, and that's a fairly important distinction. We are hearing the same thing that other people are hearing, that the general plan is to move many of those Chapter 36 provisions that are being removed from statute to board policy. We don't have a definitive statement yet as to which of those provisions would move to board policy. Many people are asking those questions. There's an expectation that the board may respond to that fairly soon, so we will wait for those announcements. But there is no proposal, as far as any of us are aware, to do anything with leave that is already accrued.
And I'll take a crack at the budget question. We're really talking about two different numbers in terms of what the shortfall will be. The structural deficit is where you get the $2 billion figure from. And that does indeed include all of the requests. If you add up all of the requests from all of the state agencies and line them up and said, this is what the agencies are asking for versus the amount of revenue that is available, you would have about a $2 billion spread. And the question that some have posed is that really fair? Because you know that the legislature is not going to approve all of the requests that come from the agencies. And so therefore you step back and you take a look at what is the operating deficit. And it's estimated that the real operating deficit, if you set aside all of the requests that are unlikely to be met, it's somewhere in the $900 million range. And the $300 million cut that is proposed for the UW system would be used, that savings would be used to go ahead and fill the hole on the operating side. The other great big elephant in the room, the issue that is putting enormous pressure both on the UW budget, UW system budget, and all of the other agencies is Medicaid. The amount of money continues to go up that is required to fund the Medicaid system, and that is one of the reasons why we, not just this budget cycle, but the last 3 budget cycles have seen increasing pressure put on the bottom line.
Okay. All right, Stan. Thank you. Okay. All right, any other questions? Yes.
Hi. My name is Matthew Schuss, and I work in the Division of Student Affairs. I used to work in Finance and Administrative Affairs previously. My question is about the suggestion box, or whatever we're going to have. Where will that be, and who is it going to go to? And I guess I have a suggestion for the suggestion box. We were given a task that trickled down to a lot of accountants. I'm an accountant. And you're supposed to come up with 5 to 10% of your operating budget. Where that comes in as tricky is operating budgets have a lot of stuff in them that can't be necessarily cut. For instance, in the Division of Student Affairs, we have a large operating budget, but it includes cost of goods sold, which we sell in our restaurant operations, which we sell in our bookstore. Now, how do we come up with reducing that when actually that brings in revenue? So categorizing expenses may be the best way of going about this. So for instance, I look at our statement of net revenues and I see this really big figure on there for our loss on disposals. Now in the accounting world, that's kind of like, yikes, we just got rid of stuff that we depreciated, but not fully depreciated. And that number's pretty big. It's right around $1 million for the last year, and for prior years, it's actually been around $2 million. That means we're throwing away things that are not fully depreciated. So in an accountant's mind, that's like, well, that's a no-brainer. Let's just stop throwing things away. So just looking at categories versus actually the whole picture, and then maybe looking at 5 to 10% of those categories, that might actually be the best way of looking at it versus going your whole budget and then finding similar categories and going that way. So suggestion, and the question was, where are the suggestion boxes going to be? I have tons of them.
Yeah, well, and we need them all. So thank you, Matthew, first of all. I think Robin and Tom both probably have some perspectives on this.
First of all, thank you about your comments in the scenario planning. What we asked for is a very rough thing and applies differently, unit by unit. And so we're hoping for very much a conversation, an iterative process where we get that kind of feedback back and then can kind of bounce us back and forth a bit. So thank you for that. In terms of a suggestion box, I'm really hoping we don't have any boxes anywhere. We'd be paper-free. It would definitely be an online. I'm either looking at a survey that we'd send out to all faculty and staff or a link to a survey that would sit on our website that we could continuously take ideas. In the meantime, if you're really burning to send something through, I think through the question box on the budget page, you can certainly send that, and everything that's coming in, whether it's a question or a comment, is being sent to everybody involved. And so that is something you can do in the meantime. But we'll be working on this within the next week to get something more formal and directed specifically to budget ideas.
And I would suggest, again, go to the front page of the budget information site, and there's an area where you could write in your story. By the way, we've had some wonderful, wonderful suggestions and narratives that have come from folks here on campus telling their story about how they make a difference, how we make a difference. And we're meeting with our communication team actually tomorrow to begin talking about how we take these ideas, these fabulous stories of how you've changed lives here, how we change lives every day, and package that in a way that we can get in front of the public, in front of the legislators, and in front of the general public to have a deeper appreciation for what we're doing. You know, the great frustration is that we see the product of our work every day. It's our students. It's the research, it's the community partners that we have. And it's maddening, even when we put together, you know, great storybooks like this, it's maddening to see that that story is not yet getting through to the level that we would hope that it would. We're not alone. I talked to my colleagues at the other campuses around the state, and they see the same challenge. How do we go ahead and make the case that, that we are truly relevant in what we're doing? I do have one bright note to report. It seems like we all are kind of down here on a Monday, but let me tell you an episode that occurred last week that was incredibly encouraging. Thursday, we hosted a WisPolitics luncheon at the Zilber School. It's part of an ongoing forum that UWM helps sponsor for engaging the public dialogue on important issues. And we had two members of the Joint Finance Committee present, a Democrat and a Republican, Lena Taylor on the Democratic side, and Dale Kuyenga, who's the vice chair of the Joint Finance Committee and the second-ranking Republican on the committee that ultimately will determine where we're going. The two of them, because of the partisan nature of this, did butt heads a little bit. They actually agreed on some significant issues. But in the course of the dialogue, Representative Kuyenga, who again is the vice chair of Joint Finance, said, let me tell you something that I would like to see more of around the state, and that is the way in which UW-Milwaukee embodies the Milwaukee idea, or the Wisconsin idea. This is a Republican who is going to be voting on this budget. He said, I can look at UWM and I see a campus that embodies the spirit of the Wisconsin idea more than any other campus in the state. And he said, to me, that's impressive. We need to reward that. We need to see all of the campuses step up and do what UWM does in terms of its commitment to the community. I think that's an incredibly powerful statement on his behalf because it's a recognition that, that some people are seeing that we make a difference. We need now to echo that with the 15 other members, and then all of the members of the Assembly and the Senate who ultimately will vote on this. But I think that's a very encouraging sign.
Thank you. Last question. Yes, please.
Lest we end on a down note, I would very much like to thank all of you for the work that you put into this. I think we all know that you're working tirelessly. Robin, thank you for having a longer range vision than our state legislature. I think planning for a 6-year transition is extremely hopeful. I worry a little that there will be another budget cut 2 years down the line. So I have no doubt that you're trying to put that out of your mind, but taking it into account as well. Provost Britz, I want to say thank you very much for your impassioned words at the Senate meeting last Thursday. They were really very moving. And our governance people have been absolutely fantastic. Now, many of my colleagues are far more articulate than I am in talking about these issues, but I want to echo their words in asking again about Chapter 36. Because I think we really need to make a clear message to our regents that they need to take a stand immediately to protect the foundational document in Chapter 36. We're a model for the nation here. The Wisconsin idea takes us far beyond the state of Wisconsin today. I think if you look back at that, the statement that the university should spread to the edges of the state, you know, back when that was put together, the state was a pretty big place. Today, I think we see UWM bringing Wisconsin to the whole world, bringing Milwaukee to the whole world, and bringing the entire world into Milwaukee. And I think we need to protect the essential foundation of that, which is not only the budget. It's the academic freedom at the heart of it. It's the people who have the possibility to work on behalf of the people of Wisconsin and not merely for the latest paying sponsor. So I'd like to ask, since this is going on beyond Wisconsin, since we know that changes in the future of higher education are really a much more broad-spread phenomenon that we all have to face today, are we doing anything to reach beyond Wisconsin and create alliances? Are we looking to work with higher education professionals in Illinois and Texas and beyond? Are we thinking about the bigger world? Because the sense that universities are truly places where we create the possibilities to work against social intolerance, to promote critical thinking. The academic freedom that is at the heart of Chapter 36 is what preserves that. It's the tenure system, it's the governance system, and it's the possibility to do something meaningful within a public higher education system, not a privatized one.
Thank you. Very well said. Beyond Wisconsin, panelists, to your knowledge, are we doing anything, any connections that we have? I'm certainly not aware of anything that we're doing right now from a UWM perspective. Is our system linked up with other systems? Are there reach outs? I don't know. But panelists?
We've had some conversations with colleagues who are going through similar sort of cuts, but at this point there is no organized effort to link our work with others. I suspect that may happen at the national level with some of the associations that we belong to, but real honestly right now, I view our work right now, at least in my area, as boots on the ground. We've got a joint finance committee here in Wisconsin that we have to be laser focused on, and then the rest of the legislature when it moves on to them.
Let me speak just to affirm again my stance on Chapter 36, and I think everybody up on the panel today. I certainly want to support everything we can, whether it stays in current Chapter 36 or if it moves over to the public authority, however that's going to move over. The elements that you mentioned, tenure, shared governance. When I'm with legislators, when I'm in the media, if there's ever questions about that, and even if there are not, I will talk about that, and I've expressed that to regents and have had some good conversations about the value of that. Sometimes I'm asked, well, wouldn't it be easier if you didn't have that? And I will directly rebut that. It's just simply too important. You've heard that in my plenary. You'll see that in my statement that will be coming out later this week. Chapter 36 is how we operate, and it's why we have so many of the strengths that we do have. Let there be no question about that. Whatever happens, and I think that there's others that have spoken well about this in terms of how ingrained in our DNA it is, the concept of shared governance across all our levels. So just want to make sure you're all continuing to hear that from my perspective, and I think everybody on this panel as well. Yeah. And you heard, I think you heard, on Thursday, some of the perspectives that are out there among that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me thank you all again for engaging, for all the things that you do, for coming to this and continuing to stay abreast of all the ways that we can make a difference. Thanks. Okay.